For those of you who don't know me, my name's Alistair Tudor. I'm the Commercial Operations Manager for Somerset Chamber of Commerce. This is an event that we've organised in conjunction with the FSB. So we've got Ruth Lambert from the FSB on the call, and of course thank you to the staff of Somerset County Council who are going to hopefully give us a load of useful information about the procurement process. We will be hearing from James Gilchrist today from Somerset County Council, from Gary Coleman, from John Marks, and from Steve Barker as well around the process of procurement with the council. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping in order to try and keep any background noise to a minimum whilst our speakers are speaking, and I count myself in that, as you've just heard. Please do mute yourselves. I think everybody's on mute, which is great. We are recording this, and we will share that recording with you afterwards as well. Any questions that you've got, if you can please use the chat function for questions, and we will come to a Q&A at the end of the session. So I'm going to hand over to Ruth, who's going to give us a quick introduction, and then we'll get cracking. Ruth, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Alistair. I just wanted to say welcome to everyone on behalf of the FSB. We're really pleased to be partnering with Somerset Chamber on this, and we're really grateful to Somerset Council for being up for doing this event, which really came out of meetings that ourselves and the Chamber have been having with the procurement team, because they're looking to make their procurement processes more accessible to small businesses. So they're really keen to work with local small businesses, and we really appreciate that sentiment. So we hope you enjoy the session today, and I'm going to put my details in the chat. So if you do have any procurement issues that you think they need to know about, let us know and we can have a chat with them, because it won't be deliberate, I'm sure. Thanks, Alistair.
Thanks, Ruth. Right. Natalie is going to share her screen so that we've got the presentation, and then I am going to hand over to James Gilchrist, who's our first speaker today.
Thanks, Alistair. It might actually be better if I quickly hand back over to Gary, because I think he might want to go through the agenda and running order, and then I'll do a little bit of the context setting, if that's okay. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. So just to start off, thank you for inviting us to speak to you today. My name's Gary Coleman. I work within the Commercial and Procurement area within Somerset County Council. We're going to talk to you today about procurement and economic and community infrastructure. So James is on the call, and we've got Steve and John also on the call from Commercial and Procurement team. We will be providing you with a copy of this slide deck, so there's no need to scribble notes. We realise there's a lot of information here, and we'll go through it quite quickly so we get into the Q&A. So no need to keep notes. We'll give you that information. And the idea today is that we'll give you some information on how we operate, what we buy, where we advertise, our requirements, and how to work with Somerset County Council, and what we're doing to engage and encourage SMEs to work with us. So if we can move on to the next slide, and I will hand you over to James.
Thank you very much, Gary. Yeah, so I'm James Gilchrist, and I'm the senior economist at Somerset County Council. I've been on a couple of the Chamber and FSB events before to talk a little bit about economic impacts and things. That's kind of my day job, if you like. I've been asked to come along today just to give a little bit of context setting, really, for the subsequent discussion around local procurement and its importance. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Somerset Recovery and Growth Plan, and I'll only talk for a minute or two. Some of you may or may not be aware of previous iterations of the Somerset Growth Plan. Well, we were due to kind of launch a new Somerset Growth Plan back at the beginning of 2020, and then COVID struck. And as you can imagine, priorities and things, at least some of them had to change, and immediately became obvious that what we needed was a recovery plan as well as a growth plan. So hence the Somerset, Recovery and Growth Plan. This is it's a document that's created in coordination with all of the 5 councils within Somerset. And there are a number of key themes which I wanted to talk you through a little bit of now, if that's okay. We can go on to the next slide, please. So essentially, we kind of there are various phases that are set out within the Recovery and Growth Plan. The lockdown phase, which is, as we all know, has been kind of several lockdown phases. Coming back into the recovery phase, it's about supporting the economy to restart and reopen safely after the lockdown. Revitalising, which is about accelerating that recovery through local interventions, moving forward into hopefully a new growth phase. And so particularly in some of the earlier stages, it's about kind of supporting some of those bedrock industries that have been most severely impacted by COVID. Moving forward, looking forward more towards some of those higher productivity industries, which would have been the kind of, I suppose, the focus beforehand. There are 4 key themes in the strategy, and they are employment and skills and economic inclusion, particularly supporting those people back into employment who have now found themselves unemployed. I'm going to come back to the second one because that's most relevant here. Providing the infrastructure to enable growth, so that's both the physical and the digital infrastructure. And creating attractive places and homes for people to live, work and visit. In terms of helping businesses to grow, that's obviously a crucial one. And I suppose, as well as supporting businesses more broadly within Somerset, Somerset County Council is an organisation itself, and we have an important role to play. An important part of that is how we do local procurement. And we're really keen that doing local procurement better becomes, I suppose, a key part of building back better in the wake of the pandemic and as part of our recovery and growth plans. So hopefully that sets a bit of a scene in terms of where it sits within our kind of broader policy and strategy ambitions. And with that, I'll hand back over to Gary to talk a bit more about the specifics of local procurement.
Okay, if we move on to the next slide, please. So give you some context into the framework that we sit within. So all public authorities have to work within a set of legislation, which is the Public Contracts Regulations 2015, and that sets out how we should deal with our larger procurement exercises. And then we also have a local set of rules, Somerset County Council standing orders, that give us the rules of how we should deal with procurements under those thresholds. And part of that setup is that we should follow some principles for all of the procurements that we run. So non-discrimination, transparency, equal treatment, proportionality, and mutual recognition are part of what we should do with all our procurements. Have I dropped? May not be. Let me see. Can you still hear me, Alistair?
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Okay, I'm getting a bleeping at my end. So yeah, in terms of equal treatment, we treat everyone the same when they're running a procurement with us. We run a transparent process, so it's open to everyone. We publish exactly how we will evaluate our bids. We're proportional, so we try and cut down the amount of paperwork we use when we're running lower value, lower risk procurements. Non-discrimination, so we're open and fair and transparent with everyone. And mutual recognition means if you currently comply with a certain standard, if we set out a standard in our procurement documentation, we will accept a similar standard if you follow that and you run the separate rules. So we'll look to be flexible as we can with that when we run our procurement exercises. So if we move on to the next slide. So what we buy, we buy a whole range of services. Adult services, care services are the biggest area of our spend. So we spend quite a lot in that area, but we cover everything from furniture, vehicles, community care equipment, home services. So kind of areas that you'd expect to be covered by the council. We spend adult services about 240 million a year. So by far that's the biggest area of our spend. But vehicles and various services that we spend goes across a very broad range, as you'd expect from the kind of areas that we cover. So now I will hand you over to John.
Thank you, Gary. So just to gallop on, so introduced up front. So I'm John Marks. I've got responsibility within the procurement team for IT and property. So from the slide in front, it mentions around signing up to common procurement vocabulary categories. Crudely, that is one example might be you could sign up to any opportunities for cleaning. That's the overarching category. Beneath that, you could then drill down to, it might be office cleaning, school cleaning, for example, through to quite specialized septic tank cleaning, say. So we'd encourage all of you to sign up to some of these categories, and we'll come on to how you can do that in a bit. And then you'll see those opportunities that are coming out from us going forward. So the security of payment. So that's another one that's quite key, I think, as one of those positives of working with us as an authority. Full transparency of spend there. We pay invoices swiftly, as you can see. And I think the key bit is that we do pay our bills. 100% of invoices are paid. Obviously, that is a big issue, cash flow and all those other things for all businesses, but in particular, some of the smaller businesses that are out there. Final point there, I think Gary's touched on already, the non-discrimination and the treaty principles, treating everyone fairly, and that's obviously something we're keen to do as an authority. So we can move on to the next one, please. Just some figures there. So the 469 was what was spent in 2019-20. That is across such a wide area. As Gary's outlined, adults is the largest budget area, but that includes large corporate contracts, so the likes of what we've got with Microsoft for our ICT infrastructure, the Dimensions contract that we've got, the Skanska contract, but also includes going down to almost the micro providers. So it might be individual people delivering care services in individuals' homes, taxi drivers providing home to school transport and the likes of that. If we can move on to the next one, please. So this just outlines how we buy goods and services. 50,000, as you had seen from the previous slide, 40% of our contracts fall under this level. A lot of those for this value are dealt with by services directly, just with sort of a light touch support from procurement, but the need to obtain 3 written quotes. We've got the other ones there, so 50 to 100,000. We can pick 3 specific suppliers, and there'll be some opportunities going forward around how we can potentially look to ring fence those opportunities where we are able to pick to local suppliers. Anything over 100,000, if we're doing it openly, it's we advertise that openly, and that comes back to those common procurement codes that I touched on earlier, that if you're signed up to those, you will see those opportunities coming forward. The ODU threshold, that's obviously changed now. We've left Europe, but we've got the equivalent, it's called find a tender now, but we are in effect following the previous sort of levels and everything else there. And just to touch on the final one is frameworks. So frameworks are one of those things that we use sometimes where it's not necessarily advertise the opportunity, but it gives us that ability to move quickly. One example in my area that we use them a lot for is around smaller school projects, say, and projects on the corporate estate. The ability to use frameworks there are that we've got contractors that are pre-qualified, so we've done the financial vetting on them already. We know the health and safety and everything's in place, so we can run that process much quicker. And for anyone that's got any interest in sort of property related projects, we do use something called a SLOAC, selected standard list of approved contractors. That is something that Devon County Council set up. So I can provide details of how people can sign up to get added to that list so that you can be considered for any opportunities coming forward. Okay, next slide, please. And this just captures how we advertise. So we've got the Supplying the Southwest website. I'd recommend or encourage all of you to sign up, to have a look there, sign up. You'll see what opportunities are coming through. It won't just be what's coming out from Somerset. There'll be other local authority opportunities there as well. We also push things through there around future tendering opportunities and opportunities where we may wish, almost as a soft market test, to be having a discussion with providers as to what those opportunities are. Some of these will provide an opportunity as well for potential collaboration, networking for yourselves as well. So, okay, I think that's it for me. So I can probably hand you over to my colleague Steve now.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, so my name's Steve Barker. So I also work in the Commercial and Procurement team, and I mainly focus around services to public health, adults and health and children's services. So yeah, so I was just going to be running through with you some specifics in relation to tenderings for small and medium-sized enterprises, and also looking a little bit at social value. So just in terms of general how tender is kind of set up, you usually be asked to submit a selection questionnaire, which is just around your organisation's current standing and past performance. So looking at things around your kind of economic standing, your insurance levels, things like that. But it might go into more specifics around safeguarding, amongst other things. Then you'll always be required to respond to some award or quality questions. So looking at exactly how you propose to offer that service, to deliver that service, or goods and works. You'll be asked for some pricing information, obviously, to to actually provide a quote for the work or services. And there's a variety of kind of signed declarations in there that you just need to be aware of. So in order to complete, a full bid, everything has to be kind of signed off. So you've got a form of tender, your confidentiality and terms and conditions in there, which will need to be completed, as well as the other elements of the bid. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so just in terms of specifically around small and medium-sized businesses, there were some changes made to the contracts regulations in 2015, just to try and make it a little bit less onerous for those organisations to get involved in the tendering process. And so one of the key ones was around the selection questionnaire. So, so now when you're being asked to complete the selection questionnaire, many of the things on there at this point are just a tick box. So rather than being asked to actually submit reams and reams of information and policies and stuff like that right at this point, where where you don't actually know whether or not you're going to be successful, you're not being asked to do that anymore. So it's literally just a tick box at this stage to say, yes, I could provide you with my accounts if I'm successful. And then it's only at that point that the winning bidder is then actually asked to supply all of this information. There's also the opportunity to, if you don't have a particular policy of your own, you can select to adopt Somerset County Council's policies. So again, kind of just to like save the time and money spent in developing a policy, you can adopt one of ours, if that's helpful. So yeah, so also now Somerset are, well, all local authorities are obliged to give consideration to breaking their contracts down to lots, which might be more attractive to SMEs. So rather than just putting out huge great contracts that smaller businesses may not be able to get involved in, we have to look at whether or not we could legitimately break those down into smaller lots, which might be more attractive. So that could be either geographical, so quite often might break stuff down by district council area, so Mendip, Sedgemoor, etc., or the actual specifics of the service. So we've recently done one for translation services where the face-to-face and telephone elements were split down into different lots. So different companies that were interested in those specific aspects could just bid for one or both of those if they wanted to. There's also now something called the light touch regime, which is a bit of an odd title, but it is essentially just a less onerous and kind of bureaucratic process that's related to social and other specific services. So a lot of what I look at in terms of public health services and other health related things fall into that, and care services and stuff like that, children's services. So within that, you can have shorter timescales and basically a bit more freedom to design the procurement process. So it's a bit more creative and a bit less kind of bureaucratic. Yeah, next slide, please. Yes, and just following on from that, so we're also able to shorten the timescales where everything's done electronically. So as John's already said, we've got the Supplying Southwest, the electronic portal. Where all the tenders are sort of put out on there and everything's done electronically on the timescales. In terms of insurance, we are obliged to look at each tender process on a case-by-case basis. So rather than just setting very high kind of standard insurance levels for everyone to comply with, we can look at those and set them appropriately. There's also more available procedures and tools now. So a key one is the dynamic purchasing system, which is a little bit like the framework that John was describing earlier. It's basically a way for suppliers to pre-qualify. So that selection questionnaire that I was talking about, suppliers do that up front, and then they then become registered on the dynamic purchasing system. And then they can bid for the opportunities that get put out through that system without having to go through that selection each time. So each time, bidding for the actual opportunity becomes less onerous because you're actually already registered, you're already pre-qualified onto that system. So that's hopefully an easier way for business to get involved. And we've got a couple of dynamic purchasing systems, for example, in relation to transport and also care opportunities. So a lot of businesses can register on these systems and then get involved with the opportunities that come out through there. Also collaboration and subcontracting. So where we don't, where we can't split something into lots, where it just, it's not, there's not a legitimate reason for doing that. So it's quite a large contract. We do try and encourage collaboration and subcontracting. So part of our sort of market engagement, we try and encourage people to network together, and it may be that smaller businesses can get involved with the larger business and just take on part of that. Next slide. So this is just an example of what I was talking about earlier in the selection questionnaire. So this is the question for economic and financial standing. And as you can see, if you're asked initially if you've got a set of audited accounts for the last 2 years. If that's a no because you're a new startup or whatever, then there's a series of other options that you can choose. So you're not just kind of knocked out at this stage because you haven't got two years worth of audited accounts. Okay, thanks. Move on. Yeah, and now there's also the option to reserve below threshold procurements. So coming out of the EU does now mean that anything that falls below what were the EU thresholds, but what we're still kind of aligning ourselves with, we are allowed to reserve them. So there's a couple of options for this, and the full kind of detail of that is available via that link. So when you get the slide pack, you can have a look on there. But if we move on to the next slide, it actually sets out what those two options are. So yes, we can either reserve them by location, or we can reserve them just to small and medium-sized enterprises, so businesses with less than 250 employees. So we could, for example, just put out a tender opportunity in Somerset for small and medium-sized enterprises. So that's something new. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. Yeah, and then in terms of evaluating tenders, so they've always got an element of price and quality. So they're never just evaluated on lowest price alone, and that ratio again can be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And everything you need to know about the evaluation criteria, how it's going to be scored, what the exact requirements are, it will all be included up front, so you know exactly how you're going to be evaluated, what you need to do, and you know how those various questions are going to be scored and weighted. We will have a balanced and varied evaluation panel. So we'll have experts from within SCC, but also draw in other key experts from district councils or other stakeholders, Health Watch, for example, but also in some cases get service users involved in that evaluation process as well. And we'll always give feedback to both successful and unsuccessful bidders, you know, with a view to people being able to improve their bids in future. Next slide, please. Okay, so social value, I'll just quickly nip through these slides. So yes, we have to comply with the Public Services Social Value Act 2012. And although you know, it's called social value in the title there, and that's what everyone refers to it as, it actually covers economic, social and environmental well-being. So it's basically just how what we're procuring, what we're tendering can actually improve those three areas in the local, you know, in the local community. And although from an Act point of view, that only applies to service contracts that are above a certain threshold at SCC, we apply it to all our processes. So if we move on, we've just got a definition of what that is on the next slide. So yes, the additional benefit to the community from a commissioning procurement process. So it's basically, yes, it's not a direct economic benefit to Somerset County Council, but it's something that that benefits the community over and above what we're actually going out to tender for. So it could be that we ask bidders to put forward examples of social value that they might be able to provide based on their own knowledge of that particular industry or of the local area, or it could be that we'd undertaken a consultation, for example, and so ask some specifics of the bidders based on what the local community have told us that, you know, their requirements are. So if we move on to the next slide again and just look at what our social value priority areas are for the council. So we've got 6 priority areas there. The last 2 are relatively recently added around the environment. You know, and just in terms of examples of what could be delivered, so delivering careers advice in schools, work experience to long-term unemployed, other volunteering opportunities, or contributing to local community projects. One council's commissioned a cafe for their offices, and then the winning bidders provided training and work opportunities for adults with learning disabilities within that cafe, or also using local supply chain, so committing to spending a percentage in the local area. So yeah, I think that's the end of the actual slides. I think the next slide is just questions and feedback slide. So yeah, if I hand back to Alistair to have a look at the questions.
Okay, thanks. Natalie, if you can stop the share, we'll come back to the main screen. I've seen John has been running through some of these questions as we've been going, so thank you, John, because that helps us get through them all. There are a few things in there, so thank you very much. Let me just pull through some details. Do you use Crown Commercial Services for pre-existing frameworks? Yes, so the CCS is one of the framework providers that they use. Thank you, John. We've got a question here around breaking down lots, and a bit of a hot topic. Don't know whether you'll be able to answer this, but what happens if and when we become a unitary authority? Will the model remain the same with localization?
I think I answer. Shall I?
Go on, Gary. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think the rules and the regulations that apply are fairly universal for all authorities, public sector authorities. I think what we'll continue to do is push for this opening up, breaking up of lots, looking for opportunities for small and medium enterprises. Our team is fairly new formed, and just as we were forming, and COVID came in, and there's been a lot of redeployments with our team, and we're just knitting back together again. But we've got a lot of people that are really they're really focused on that, and we're trying our best to move maybe from where we've been in the past into new ways of working, and thinking how we can engage within Somerset, work with SMEs, and spend more of our money where we can within Somerset. Where we do use Crown Commercial, say for electricity contracts and things like that, is where there's a lot of spend that can be aggregated together, and we get a benefit from that big contract. But we tend to avoid it for services where we can get that within Somerset. So it depends on the market, really, how we use these bigger contracts.
Okay. Yeah, certainly, and I'm sure Ruth would agree with this. The more business that we can give to SMEs in the Southwest and Somerset, the better from our point of view as representative bodies. So it's great that you guys have got this team together to actually look at that. So thank you very much. Someone's asked the question, if you're an approved supplier for one of the Somerset district councils, does that mean you're also approved for the other districts, or are they run independently at the moment?
At the moment, they'd be independent. Our systems, we don't share a system, but obviously depending on the result of the outcome, it'll be a more unified, whichever solution goes through, it'll be a more unified system that comes through. Although everyone does share the Supplying the Southwest portal, so we all publish our opportunities on that portal. So that's why we're encouraging people to sign up to there.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. And I guess the process is going to be similar across all the districts. So should be fairly, hopefully, straightforward. Is there a breakdown if you look at the spend of the council? I know that there were some numbers spoken about at the beginning. Is there a breakdown of what proportion of that goes to SMEs versus the big companies? I think sometimes there can be a perception that a lot of these contracts go to large companies rather than SMEs.
I think we may be able to do that. I'm not entirely sure. I think that's a question we'll have to take back into the organisation.
Okay.
It's something we're definitely interested in doing moving forward if we can't do it at the moment, and we're just developing the finance systems to enable us to do that. But I think historically we maybe not asked the right questions to be able to dig down into that level of detail, and we're starting to think about how we do that so we can get those metrics to enable us.
Certainly be, yeah, I mean, certainly would be good to see that what you're doing is proving successful as a group. So yeah, that would be interesting to see. John's answered a question around exhaustive lists. So there's some systems there that are used, NHS frameworks, etc. Ruth has asked a question, how do local businesses find out about these contracts under 50,000, which require just 3? Do you know what, Ruth, that's exactly what I've written down. I think it's really important that we try and understand where, how our businesses, if you've got these small contracts under £50,000, how do you go out to businesses? How do you identify which ones you want to go to for quotes?
Yeah, to some extent that is down to the services at the moment. So we will advertise some of those requirements, but not all of them will go through the portal at the moment. So it depends on the value of the contract. So some of them go through a quick quote process, but it depends on the value. The higher up ones all get advertised, but the lower down you go, they do drop out of that process, and we just select from organizations that we know, or we go out and try and look at the marketplace and find suppliers that are in the locality where we can. So yeah, so
part of it is going to be portal led, and part of it is down to the relationships that you as businesses will have with the council as well. That'd be fair.
Gary, can I just chip in there as well? Sorry, Alistair. I think for us, it's like I said, there's this, we've almost presented the procurement side of this, but there is that greater bit of work of how the commissioners, so the services that Gary's alluded to there, how they understand the market a bit more and where there's potentially gaps to understand what's out there. So in Steve's area, some of the adults and some of the with sort of smaller providers there, I think they're very good there on picking things up. But I think one of the bits we are looking at in when we're developing services and having those sort of make or buy decisions, I think, is understanding what is out there and what is the market and potentially where those gaps are. So
yeah, okay, thank you. I've got a question around minimum standards. Steve, you mentioned that there are obviously tick boxes around, can you provide accounts and what sort of reporting can you give, which obviously if you were successful or went through that tender process you may be asked for. Are there any kind of minimum standards there, any policies that small businesses really need to have in place? I know they can adopt some of the council ones. For example, I'm sure the FSB have got a similar thing, but as a chamber, we have a system which has a document library where you can download documents to put policies in place. Are there any kind of minimum standards you'd expect to see quite easily on those? Probably a question for Steve. Are you there still, Steve? Steve might have dropped off. Okay.
Okay. Shall I jump in there and?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the subject matter. So if we're going out for something that involves, say, the environment,
yep,
it would be good to see a sustainability policy. It would be good to see that had been signed off by a director of the organisation.
Yeah.
And it'd be good to see that had been signed off within the last year or so it's been kept up to date. So that's the kind of areas we'd look at. But it does depend on the subject matter, I think, of the contract.
Yeah.
But things like sustainability are obviously, now that we're the climate change emergency and we've got new policies in that area, that's something that will probably ramp up in terms of what we're looking at. But there are all kinds of other policies depending on, like I say, we cover such a broad range of services. For us, because of the, we do everything from waste collection to adult services, and then we've got some requirement just to keep the organisation rolling. So there's all kinds of things in between, from stationery supplies all the way through.
So applying a bit of common sense as a business as to what policies you're going to need, depending on the contract, that makes sense. I guess the question was around, are there any standard policies that you always look for?
Yeah, sorry.
Steve is back in the room, so
yeah, sorry, I got thrown out just as you were asking a question, which is weird. Yeah, so the standard selection questionnaire, is available, and that's something that people get through, and we make that available so they can see what we normally ask for.
Okay,
yeah.
So there's a standard selection questionnaire that can be accessed. Okay. Yeah. Your connection is a little bit dodgy, Steve, so I'm going to move on to the next question. Got a question around if you've been unsuccessful in the past because of insufficient or poor narrative response, would this be held against a bidder in future projects?
No,
I think I answered that one. Oh,
yeah, we talked
sorry,
about
Gary.
Principles. Yeah, do you want to carry on there, John, with that one?
Yeah, it's just to say the whole process is fair and transparent. So if you've been unsuccessful before, that won't be held against you in the past. And also, where we are sending out letters to those that are unsuccessful, we do try to provide feedback. Well, no, not try. We provide feedback on why the bid was unsuccessful and how it wasn't scored and how that compared to the successful bidder. On the grounds that then as bidders, you can take that away and take that on board. So when the next opportunity comes up, you can include all that. But in effect, yes, previous tender returns don't come into it. We consider everything fair and transparently each time it comes in.
Fine, lovely, thank you. Got a question here, and I'm not surprised it's being asked really. What questions do you use to find suppliers outside of the system? What do businesses need to do to make themselves visible?
I think John touched on this, that there's kind of two aspects to this. It's making yourself, I suppose, visible to the procurement team. So we do get some cold call kind of information that comes into us, just saying we're a business in Somerset, might be a new startup, just to make us aware the next time we start a procurement exercise. And it's also getting in contact with us so that you can work out who the commissioning managers are within the organisation.
Okay.
So procurement is a support function, and we have a commissioning structure, and the commissioning managers actually are the subject matter experts in their own area of the organisation, and they they will understand the market. So for adult services, they'll understand the marketplace there alongside Steve. So there's two elements really. It is raising your profile, I suppose, with us, and just letting us know what you can do and the services you can provide.
Yeah,
and then
I guess there's so many different areas of purchasing within the council. You know, it is occasionally going to be down to those individuals to identify the businesses that they think can fulfill their requirements. So that makes sense. Is there any opportunity of having a list of businesses that might be interested in supplying? Is that something you'd look at in the future?
Yeah, I think maintaining that register would be something useful to us, especially organisations within Somerset. There doesn't necessarily need to be an opportunity at the moment, but it's getting that in place for when a procurement comes up, because we can let contracts for 2 or 4 years. When they come to an end, we'd have somewhere where we could look and just check if people have expressed an interest, if we've got something on file for them.
Okay, lovely, thank you. How quickly is the score for failed bids sent out? Is it quite a quick turnaround?
Yeah, no, we don't normally hang around on that because we want to award the contract. So we would send the non-successfuls out at the same time as it's successful bids for a smaller contract, and for the larger contracts we have a standstill period. So we'd send out the unsuccessfuls before we awarded the contract, give feedback and see if anyone wanted to challenge that process and run through that before we actually awarded the contract. So they either go out at the same time or before.
Okay, thank you. A couple of people have made the point it'd be good to have a meet the buyer event. Certainly that's something that we found. We've got Natalie Beecham who runs our Hinkley Point supplier engagement portal for the chamber. Certainly the meet the buyer style events are always very popular. Is that something you might consider for, I appreciate you can't do it for every piece of procurement that you do, but for some of the larger things?
Yeah, I think it could be one of those things that we do more generally, and just have a meet the buyer for the various big areas of spend that we have, and just have an open door and invite people along as part of, and maybe do that as part of a broader event. But yeah, we could set up our stall and meet people as an event or part of a broader event. Quite how we do that now online, but I'm sure there's a way of doing it in the current environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Previous organisations I've worked with, they've been successful events and quite well attended, and opened up some information on new suppliers and people that we haven't been aware of in the past. Yeah,
certainly the meet the buyers, if there's a large piece of procurement or a specific sector that you're looking to expand your suppliers within, those are always really good, and certainly we, and I'm sure Ruth would support from a point of view of the members that we have across the region. So happy to support with that. Just having a quick look. Can we have a breakdown of commissioning managers? That might be an interesting one. That might open it up a little bit. I'm not sure on the feasibility of that one. It would be nice, but I'm not sure. There used to be a register of all businesses and what they did. Appreciate it's difficult now, but not everyone want to be considered. Up to them to submit. Yeah, it's almost like an online directory of businesses that would want to be involved. Yeah, I think that might be worth looking at as well. You then start to become a supply chain portal, which would be an interesting exercise. Certainly, from our point of view, that's something that we've done, and it is useful to do that if that were something you could look at.
So depends on the area as well. So I think the area that Steve's responsible for being really successful with these dynamic purchasing systems, and actually, having organisations pre-registered, a lot of small and medium-sized companies on those pre-registered, and then when packages of work come up, they get fed out through that system, and people just are already on there, they're already pre-qualified, so they just bid for that individual package of work. So when we look at our supply base coming from the commercial side, so I sit on the commercial side, so we have got a large supply base, and we've got a lot of spend relatively low spend with a lot of suppliers. So I think that indicates that we have been quite successful in using small organizations and
Right.
you know, spreading our spend around within Somerset. All the indications when you look more broadly at our spend is that we haven't just focused on a few big suppliers. We have got quite a big supply base, and I think those dynamic purchasing systems have helped drive that within Somerset.
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly I think, and I'm sure that Ruth will agree with me, that we as business representative bodies and membership organisations for businesses across the region would certainly encourage the council and support the council in spending as much possible as possible within with businesses locally. So anything that we can do to support your supply chain, whether it be providing you with details of businesses that are, you know, registered with either of us around specific requirements that you've got, you know, if we can support on that, we will do, certainly. They got a question on Hinckley. Alan, we'll come back to you separately on that one if that's okay. I've got your details. I think I spoke to you yesterday, so we can drop you a line on the Hinckley one. There's always things going on there, but it always depends on where the work is and what's going on there. So I'll ask Natalie or Alan to get in contact with you from there. And then we've got Conex portal. Conex companies willing to collaborate and looking for suppliers. That's Lee from MC&C. Hi Lee, good to see you on here. So yeah, there's ways of certainly working together. Okay, we've got to the end of the questions on here, so I'm going to hand over to Ruth. Ruth, are you happy to finish us off here and close the event for us?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'd just like to thank all our speakers today for taking part. It's really great to open this conversation. I think, you know, as Alistair said, we're really keen as business support organisations to work alongside you to try and make your supply chain as accessible as possible. And thank you to everyone in the audience who came along today for making it such a successful event. It's great to see so many people and such an appetite for working with the council. So watch out for your newsletters from both our organisations. If we do manage to get a register of businesses or a meet the buyer event in place, we'll be promoting it out to you as widely as we can. So yeah, thanks Alistair too for hosting.
Thanks Ruth. Yeah, once again, thank you to the speakers from the council, to Gary, to John, and Steve. Thanks Natalie for running those slides. As I have said, we have been recording this, so we'll edit this video down and make sure it comes out to you with the slides as well. So thank you very much, and hopefully we will see you all soon. Any questions as a result of the email that comes out, please do let us know.